Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this program today we'll be asking why should we care about Armenian Christians who are again on the brink of genocide. Warm welcome to the programme, and have two special Iranian Christians on today's programme as we are talking about the desperate plight that Armenian Christians face themselves in today. And in today's programme, I'm joined by Rakik Sarkissian, who is the leader in the Armenian community here in the UK, together with His Grace Bishop Hovakim Manukyan, who's from the Armenian Church in the UK. So, gentlemen, welcome to the programme. And Rafi, it's good to have you back on the programme. We've recorded many programmes together, particularly marking the Holocaust, the genocide that the Armenian community faced over a century ago. But would you just give us an update on some of the activities being carried out by your community to raise awareness of what's happening to your people in Nagorno-Karabakh, the province of Armenia?
Thank you, Simon. It's always nice to be back at the program. Over the recent years, and particularly since the collapse of the Soviet Union, various people of different countries that were under the rule of Soviet Union attempted to become independent. Along those lines, Armenia became independent, Azerbaijan became independent, and at the same time, along the same period, the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenian called Artsakh, they also decided that they would like to become independent because they were already self-ruling, and that section of Armenian population and the territory was passed on to the Azerbaijanis by Stalin during the Lenin rule, and since then it has been an oblast that has been autonomous in ruling their own affairs. And as a result, because they were under pressure for several years from Azeris in order to capture the area and get rid of the Armenians, and they wanted to capture the territory, during that time they were constantly subjected to shelling and bombing. Baroness Cox has attended to visit the Artsakh region and our people there, and she witnessed the bombings as well. Actually, her vehicle was bombed very nearby, and the vehicle was almost overturned as a result of the bombing. So there was no doubt that that was being carried out. The Azeris had captured Shushi, or they call it Shusha, but the actual name is Shushi, which is the Armenian name, and they were storing all their Grad missiles in the church in Shushi. So it was quite a difficult situation for Armenians to live over the years, and therefore they preferred to become independent rather than be subjected to treatment like that. So they went for a general referendum and decided with clear majority to become independent. As soon as that decision was announced, Azerbaijan reacted by continuing its shelling and bombing and invading the region and killing, and all sorts of responses that they came up with instead of trying to find a negotiation and solution to the issue. And since then, the situation hasn't settled. There was the initial war after 1919 that the Armenians won, and they captured quite a few territories around the Nagorno-Karabakh region. During that time, there was continuous conflicts and so on. The leaders, or the president of Armenia and Azerbaijan, attempted several occasions to come to a solution and come to a settlement and a peace treaty, but unfortunately that didn't work. And usually it's been Azerbaijan that has not respected the negotiations and have changed their mind. Since then, the situation continued, became more intense, and in 2020 the 40-day war took place, and with the help of Turkey and missionaries, Azerbaijan managed to inflict quite a big damage. We lost about 5,000 Armenian soldiers. There was brutality and all sorts of beheading and murders and bombing and shelling, including use of the drones, Turkish drones, that resulted in the loss of Armenian side. They recaptured quite a lot of territories, and since then the pressure has been building up. They continue shelling and making life very difficult, expecting Armenians to leave the region. Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh has been Armenian populated for millennia. There are evidence of all sorts in the region, although some of the evidence like churches and cross stones and so on have been destroyed by Azeri attempts, have been shelled and bombed and everything. And as a result, the pressure has mounted to a situation now that has become desperate. Since last night, Azeris have started attacking the region again, bombing and shelling, and now are actually present in Artsakh and in the capital Stepanakert, expecting people to leave, and they're creating quite a difficult situation. There is almost a havoc taking place. We've already had casualties. Roughly about 20 have been killed as a result of the shelling. And we're hoping that we can find some sort of a negotiation channel in order to settle the situation to a controllable condition that people's lives could be saved. Otherwise, there's fear that further killings will take place, and therefore the life of 120,000 Armenians is in immediate danger.
Yeah, thank you for giving us that strategic overview and historic overview of the situation of the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. And it's an absolute pleasure that we can introduce now His Grace, Bishop Hovakim. Share with us your background growing up in Armenia and how you entered the clergy.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you for the invitation to come to this program.
It's a pleasure.
Well, I was born and I grew up in a Christian family. And Christianity came to me from my mother's side, because my mother's grandmother, who was a survivor of Armenian genocide, she was very devout Christian. When I was a kid, she would take me to the church, and our house is nearby Ashmedin Cathedral, which is one of the oldest Christian cathedrals in the world. So it was built in 303 after immediately when Armenia adopted Christianity as a state religion. So I grew up in this atmosphere, meeting clergy and so on, but eventually God chose me. He brought me to his service, and this is why I'm in the church.
Amazing. So what is it, explain to us, and particularly to our viewers as well, what Armenia is like as a country as well?
Well, Armenia is an old Christian country. It used to be bigger in territory between Black, Caspic and Mediterranean seas on Armenian highland. Even if you go to Rome Colosseum, you can find on the Roman maps the old Armenia, and if you go to ancient maps, manuscripts, you can find a lot of evidence about Armenia. Even in old Persia, I don't know how to call it, in Kermanshah, there is records about old Armenia. So Christianity came to Armenia in the 1st century by 2 apostles of Jesus Christ, and it was preached and spread, and then beginning of 4th century, because of hard work and endeavors of Saint Gregory the Illuminator, Armenian king converted into Christianity, and Armenia became a Christian nation. And one of the historians in the 5th century, he has this metaphor, like Christianity is the color of the skin for Armenians, and we suffered a lot for this, but also we kept our faith strongly, and our history has become a history of cross.
Amazing. And can you share with us what your role is as a bishop of the diocese for the Armenian Church?
Well, a bishop in every diocese is a super overseer of the spiritual life of the church. So we have here a community which dates back to 19th century, and because we had our first church in 1870 in Manchester, Holy Trinity Church. Since then, Armenian Christians have been present in this country. And then we built churches in London. We have communities across the country and also in Ireland. So I'm looking after these communities.
Wonderful.
Spiritually, but also I'm involved in our community life, supporting our country and doing advocacy work, and also getting involved ecumenically.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, because you know, the Armenian people are very special people in God's eyes, and it's so important that we raise awareness of the plight of your people, and this is what this program's about. Rafi, you and I have done many programs to remember the biggest Christian genocide in history, where over 1.5 million Armenians were ethnically cleansed by the Ottoman Turks during the First World War, that started on the 25th of April 1915. And we've done programs on this, raised awareness on this, but how much do we need to put this into its historical context of what happened over a century ago is on the verge of possibly happening again if we don't see intervention by the international community and, of course, God himself to protect your ancient Christian people?
That's a very good question, Simon, because there is quite a few similarities. So in 1914, within the Ottoman Empire, we had over 140 civil servants that were Armenian, and doctors and lawyers and nurses and everything. So what I'm trying to explain is that the Armenian population in Turkey or Ottoman Empire then was living a level life with that of the Turks. So we were at the same level, so socially, economically, and we were serving the country as well. But when Kemal Atatürk came to power, the situation changed, the policies changed, and there was quite a famous meeting of 5 leaders, Ottoman leaders, that decided that they want to do away with the Armenians. And instructions went through to all regions, and within one night they captured all the leaders of the Armenian community in Istanbul and other regions, particularly in Istanbul, and marched them out and got rid of them, killed them basically. And following that, it was then quite a detailed program of gathering all the Armenians in all various regions. That's about 30 different locations that the Armenian population existed at the time, and the population at the time was estimated to be 2.4 million Armenians. And they marched them out into the desert, Syrian deserts, and along the route they killed them, and out of hunger and sickness, a lot of the people died and so on, and very few managed to survive, particularly the younger generation that was obviously more agile and able to cope with the conditions, and they ended up in orphanages in the Middle East, and gradually they were transferred to France and various other countries in America as well. So that was the circumstances then. Although the Ottoman Empire blamed the Armenians that we took side with Russians, but that's an excuse, it's not a reality. And I would like to emphasize that Armenians were living and contributing to the society in a great way. There are monuments that Armenian architects have built in Turkey that are still standing and are famous sites that are enjoyed by the people of the world visiting Turkey. Now, the same situation more or less applies to Azerbaijan. Armenian people living in the enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh got on with their lives and didn't really bother anyone. They only would have reacted when Azeris made life difficult, or they forcibly populated the area by Azeris that wasn't welcomed, obviously, because the proportion of the Armenians in the region was changing, and it wasn't welcome because gradually they would have taken over. And it was kept as much as possible populated by Armenians. As I mentioned, there were several churches that were serving the communities in the region, and they are still standing, although some of them have been destroyed. And Armenians only reacted when they were pushed for it. And by shelling and bombing the regions, obviously it's not a situation that is acceptable, and therefore Armenians in some cases took up arms to protect themselves. Now, given that the region was handed to Azeris by Russia, and given that it was an oblast that was supposed to be self-ruling, therefore the Armenians there expected that, and expected that to be respected by Azeris as well. But unfortunately that equation hasn't been respected and continues to be violated. And therefore Armenians are under threat, and given the recent example of the 2020 40-day war, that they mercilessly killed about 5,000 of the soldiers rather than come to an agreement and a solution, indicates that the possibility of another genocide is there and it can't be denied. And our efforts in the diaspora and in Armenia are being now focused on informing the governments in the West especially that that threat it still exists, and therefore we need to come to a solution that will respect the right of self-determination of the population, of our Armenian population of Artsakh, and find a solution, a peaceful solution that will be a lasting solution, rather than a situation that will continue to be conflicts and wars.
Absolutely. So let's have a look now at the Armenian genocide through this excellent CBN report that took place back in 1915, carried out by the Ottoman Turks.
About 1.5 million Christians were killed in what is now eastern Turkey during World War I. Armenians claim it was part of a deliberate policy of genocide ordered by the Ottoman Turk government. Turkey has denied the charge.
Сегодня для всего армянского народа день скорби, день воспоминания геноцида 1915 года. Это тяжелый день, но я сегодня рад, что народ помнит и будет помнить во все времена.
20 countries, including Germany, Sweden, Russia, and Canada, recognized the acts in 1915 as genocide. 43 U.S. states had done so as well.
And the Armenian people themselves are Christians, and this was the biggest Christian genocide in history. And again today they face a very dangerous and precarious situation of possibly facing another genocide again because of Azerbaijan. His Grace Bishop Hovakim, your people, the Armenian people, are back in your ancient homeland, and just share with us the dark shadow that the Armenian genocide casts over your people today, not only in Armenia itself, but also throughout the diaspora around the world.
Let me add something about the genocide. Genocide didn't happen only in 1915. It started in 1893 in Ottoman Empire and ended 1923 in modern Turkey, but also in territory of Azerbaijan. As a state, Azerbaijan was formed after the collapse of Russian Empire at the end of World War I and by Turkey. And there were massacres of Armenians in Karabakh already in the beginning of 20th century. This conflict is not limited to, let's say, it's restarted, let's say, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union. But it has roots in the history. So what happened? Armenians, they came, they settled in our territories. They started to take over our people, forcefully convert most of them local population into Islam, like local people who were living beyond the river of Kura in the present territory of Armenia, Azerbaijan. They were converted forcefully, and always they were under persecution. They were considered second sort of people, second class of people. Always there has been this persecution, and you see, they started even during the Soviet period. Even the Soviet period, they killed, they took our lands, and always they wanted to destroy Armenians as a nation. And today, it's very difficult to understand the situation in the modern world, but I'll bring an example. If now, today is a very sad day for me because Azerbaijan completely took over Karabakh, and we have there 120,000 people, 30,000 children, women, elderly, innocent people. So what they are going to do, once they destroyed self-defense of Karabakh, like Nazi style, Einsatzgruppen is going to enter the country, arrest men, those who were involved in defense of the country, women and children, kill them. Yesterday, today, we have evidences of mass killing of children. When they were trying to escape the war zone, when they were encircled and they were trying by car to escape, the car collided. They tried to go to forest. The soldiers followed, started to shoot children. So this is exactly example. And I mean, it's been a suffering for our people. It's 100 years we are in this situation. And we cry out, we speak about this, but I don't know why the main powers, they put political interest, economic interest above justice. This is not working. And also the Armenian genocide, recognizing and condemning it is to prevent other atrocities against humanity. They don't understand this. And this hasn't happened. I'm speaking about recent 100 years, we know, but why we have Armenian diaspora? Because we were forced to leave our country. We were deported. First, in 19th century, we know this history, but it happened in 18th century, in 17th century. Constantly we have been killed, actually, in our country, in our territories. This is why today we have diaspora. And diaspora has a pain, this history of genocide. This is why diaspora is more sensitive to this kind of questions. And yesterday, I spoke with people, they were crying what is happening in Artsakh. And the world is indifferent. And also, when you look at the history of world wars, they started from this kind of small conflicts. If now we don't prevent this kind of conflicts, small conflicts that is happening in Caucasus, in Ukraine, other places, then we are going to face bigger troubles as a humanity, as international community. This is why international community has to stop Azerbaijan from doing atrocities against Armenians.
Absolutely. And one other aspect that I want to bring into this equation, Rafi, is what the Azerbaijanis have been doing culturally for decades, not only ethnically cleansing the Armenian people in Artsakh, and there's another province of belonging to the Armenians. Is it called Navajan? Navajani?
Nakhichevan, yeah.
Region as well. And of course, we're talking about ethnic cleansing, forced migration, as well as destruction of Armenian monuments, churches, cemeteries, including the biggest Armenian cemetery in the world as well. Just share with us how this is ethnic cleansing, because it's not only ethnically cleansing the Armenian Christians in that area of the world, but it's also destroying your history, your heritage as well. And that is a crime against humanity.
It is indeed. It's a major crime, actually, and unfortunately, the world powers that can have an influence and can make a change prefer to stay quiet because they're benefiting from the oil and other economic reasons. It's a complicated question to explain, but and the depth of it is, as you mentioned, quite significant. Destruction of heritage, destruction of churches, destruction of Armenian cemeteries that have beautiful crosses, stone-made crosses by craftsmen and all that, is a crime. It's crime against humanity, crime against history. It's a denial of history. In other words, they're attempting to say there was no Armenian presence here. Aliyev has instructed their historians to come up with excuses to try and justify that Armenia was never there. They claim Yerevan was part of Armenia, whereas Yerevan is older than Rome, and there was no Azeris at the time in the region. So it's beyond belief what's happening, and their approaches, their announcements that they come up with, or their claims that they make, is ridiculous and baseless. The Armenian presence in the region has gone on for centuries. There is all sorts of evidence and published evidence, not just visual evidence, that is undeniable. And all sorts of programs and historians who justify that as well. However, they continue to attempt to change what they call their own history, to put claims in place, to expect Armenians to accept that, which is impossible. And also, sadly, the authorities and the West and the United Nations, whichever authority we refer to, are not making an issue about this, are not objecting and telling Azerbaijan or Turkey, indeed, to, hang on, you need to rethink about this, you need to change your approach. One of the key issues that is important for everyone is how can you deny your own history? And even recently, America, United States recognized the Armenian genocide, which was long awaited for. And finally, Biden's administration decided to go ahead with that. So if almost all the world has accepted the Armenian genocide as a reality in history, why is Turkey continuing to deny that? Why is Turkey trying to miseducate its people and tell them that there was no genocide? And obviously the intellectuals in Turkey do not agree with that approach. They even came up with the Turkish Historical Society writing new history about what happened at the time, which is all formulated to try and change the actual reality. Whereas all sorts of archives, including the German archives especially, specifically mention what exactly happened at the time. Even the Jewish people were about to be subjected to genocide, but in Yozgat region, they managed to find negotiations with the Ottoman leaders at the time, and they allowed them to leave the region. But Armenians, Assyrians, and Kurds have always been subjected to all sorts of mistreatment. Now, coming to more recent 9 months, and since late last year, Azerbaijan blockaded the only route from Armenia to Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh that was providing them with supplies and medication and fuel, etc. It's been 9 months that the Artsakh region or Nagorno-Karabakh has been under blockade, complete blockade. And hunger and illness and sickness and death is happening constantly every day. How can the West, particularly the West in this case, close their eyes? How can Russia close their eyes to that reality? Russian peacekeeping force is in the region, I believe about 2,000 soldiers, but what are they doing? Even today, when the population, 120,000 population, is under pressure to leave the area, the Russian soldiers apparently aren't active trying to protect them. So from one hand, the West isn't really acting. From the other hand, Russia is engaged with the Ukraine problems and not paying much attention to the Caucasus, and therefore that leaves Azerbaijan and Turkey to plan and to implement what they want.
And to add that, the media silence from our mainstream media corporations that should be exposing potentially what it amounts to another genocide against your people, and yet there's silence. So I'm so pleased that we're recording a programme on this today. I have His Grace Bishop Hovakim. I do want to talk about the situation that occurred in Artsakh back in September of 2020, and particularly what happened this was during COVID-19, and this was the global pandemic where nations closed their doors, and Azerbaijan saw this as an opportunity to invade Artsakh. And what we find there is that the Armenian soldiers who were captured by Azerbaijani forces and their mercenaries revealed that they hired by Turkey were offered $1,000 for each Armenian head they cut off, as well as the plight of Armenian soldiers captured by Syrian mercenaries fighting with the Azerbaijani forces would take their phones, record their torture live on Facebook for their families to see. Just share with us how horrific and how brutal these mercenaries and the Azerbaijani forces are fighting against your people.
Well, Simon, you told everything, and maybe today they come to Europe, to the UK, they present themselves as a civilized people, or they have Formula One in Baku, they present they're modern and so on, but in reality they use medieval methods dealing with people. Even when you are at war, there are Geneva Convention and so on, they completely ignore this. And there are examples of, the war started even during, you're right, during COVID-19, and it was immoral act, start a war when world is fighting disease against humanity, a pandemic. So what happened? It hasn't ended in November 9. It continues, and today, until today, they attacked also on sovereign territory of Armenia last year, and they decapitated a female soldier. And they showed it on TV, recorded it, and they showed it on their social media, on YouTube channels. We are dealing with this kind of people. And that completely, they have been demonizing Armenians for decades. They are rewriting history. They have been destroying our monuments. They created so-called Albanian church out of their special agent of their special services and trying to present it to the world. You see, in Nakhichevan, you were speaking, they destroyed 5,000 Armenian crossstones. Crossstones are like icons in the Armenian tradition. They destroyed Armenian churches, any trace. And yesterday they captured 4th century Armenian monastery. In Karabakh, we have a few historical monasteries. Some of them they took in autumn 2020, and some of them they took yesterday. And today, Amaras was a monastery where grandson of Saint Gregory the Illuminator was buried, and first Armenian school was created in the beginning of 5th century when Armenian alphabet was created and Bible was translated into Armenian. So we are dealing with this kind of people, and Aliyev, who is a dictator, whose father was the chief of Soviet KGB, now inherited his power from his father. He has a lot of money and he acts with impunity, and no one is there to stop him. And he completely ignores the calls from international community. Yesterday, Secretary of State Department of USA told them to stop. They ignored it. President of European Union, I think, how do you call it? They called them. He completely ignores the international call. From international community, he feels powerful, and we have to stop it, because he's not doing this against Armenians alone, but also he's ignoring the international order, international community, and Christians are in danger in that region. Armenia is a Christian country, Georgia is a Christian country, but both of them, but especially Armenia. Armenia is in danger. They want completely to annihilate this country. They have given books to their soldiers when the war started in 2020. maps that they were going to liberate so-called their historical land. And all the churches, Armenian regions, they created their own Azeri names, and they taught their soldiers, and they start from the school that they had to liberate this. But this is Armenian land. Karabakh, Artsakh is Armenia. It became part of the Azerbaijan territory because of deal between Soviet Communist Russia and Turkey, between Lenin and Atatürk, without considering the interest of that people. And Nakhichevan also became part of that, of Azerbaijan, because of that agreement. And also Lenin and Russians, they gave to Turks in 1921 Mount Ararat, biblical mountain, which was part of Eastern Armenia, and also ancient historical capital of Armenia, 10th century capital.
And this is where it's believed the Ark of Noah's Ark rested.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And unfortunately, when Russia is weakened in the West, he makes sacrifices and makes deals with Turkey, and on account of Armenians, this is our reality. We are in this bad geopolitical situation.
And Rafi, I think it's very important when we look at the appalling situation that your people are in, that we also look for statements made by the president of Azerbaijan, which he said publicly that Armenia as a country is of no value. Armenian territory is artificially created on Azerbaijani lands. And then in 2020 he said that we chased the dogs out of our lands. Just share with us how this is inflaming the situation, how this is also incitement to genocide as well, because he's failing to recognize the Armenian people, their history, their culture, their identity, and of course then using military means to push out your people from your ancient homeland. That's genocide.
That's right. It's rather unfortunate and obviously unacceptable as well that a country leader who claims to be a 21st century leader makes such claims against Armenians and Armenian people and Armenia as a country. First and foremost, obviously that implies that it's done on purpose. They very well know the history of Armenia and the fact that that region has been Armenians for centuries and centuries. So it's all done with clear objective to try and somehow take over the area and take over the region. That is very clearly part of their pan-Turkic program between Turkey and other Turkic nations such as Azerbaijan. And because they have Nakhchivan and it's not that far from Azerbaijan, and it's also sharing border with Turkey, they want to capture the southern region of Armenia and join the whole Turkic nations together. That creates a huge problem geopolitically in the region, and it affects the balance of power in the region. It will affect Iran, it will affect obviously Armenia. It will close the route that travels between Armenia, Iran and Georgia to Russia. And it will effectively create quite a difficult situation for people in that region to function as a normal country or as a normal people. As a result, obviously there is a lot of conflicts, a lot of problems. And instead of finding a solution that will stabilize Caucasus, it will make it prosperous, and it can make it prosperous for various reasons. It will allow Azerbaijan or any other country to maximize its profiting of their oil or any other business opportunities they may have. But on the other hand, they are obviously putting a lot of effort militarizing the whole country, getting into conflicts with neighbors, creating geopolitical problems for the region. And instead of developing and coming up with programs that will make the region a prosperous region. It's going exactly the opposite direction. More importantly, it's putting the lives of the minorities in danger. And we've had in our history, in human history, we had enough genocides and holocausts. It's time we come to our senses and start talking about a sensible solution to the region. And I'm really disappointed to say, and we've all witnessed that even OSCE didn't manage to come to a solution and find a peaceful resolution to this conflict. And I'm hoping that within the forthcoming meeting in Spain, that the leaders of European countries will be meeting, and prior to that, on the 5th, the President of Armenia and President of Azerbaijan are supposed to be meeting, and Charles Michel, the leader of the EU, will be negotiating or moderating together with President Macron. And we're hoping that that opportunity will be used to find a peaceful solution.
So let's have a look at this report now by CBN that's entitled "There Will Be Massacres. Armenian Christians are facing dire consequences amid Nagorno-Karabakh blockade."
One of the oldest Christian cultures in the world, Armenia, faces a potential human tragedy as tensions rise with the neighboring country of Azerbaijan. Experts worry about what's ahead because of the deadly fighting and a blockade that cut off food and important resources. Billy Hallowell has the story.
There is no time to wait and to allow the next genocide, because this is genocide.
That's how Dr. Bayana Sukhudian describes the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, a small landlocked region between Armenia and Azerbaijan. For decades, deadly battles between Armenians and Azerbaijanis have raged there, and a recent blockade has reignited those tensions.
The last big war in Karabakh happened in 2020. And at that time, Azerbaijan conquered most of the territory all around the enclave. And so there's only one road that connects the 120,000 Christians who live in this enclave to the rest of the world. And it's protected by a Russian peacekeeping force.
On December 12th, Azerbaijani protesters reportedly blocked that road, known as the Lachin Corridor, preventing food, medicine, and other basic transport in or out of Nagorno-Karabakh.
I'm a pediatric neurologist. Together with my colleague, we saw many children with epilepsy who have to take anti-seizure drug to get free of seizures. But now there is shortage of these drugs. And not only these drugs are not available, but also some painkillers and antibiotics, as well as hormonal therapy, which is very important in acute situations. In addition with that, there is shortage of baby formulas.
The blockade sparked immediate condemnation, with critics across the world calling on Azerbaijan to halt the obstruction. Ruben Vardanyan, Minister of State for Nagorno-Karabakh, believes the region's most recent battles stem, in part, from a clash of worldviews.
One conflict is a democratic country against the non-democratic, autocratic country, because in Azerbaijan, everybody knows we don't have a democratic system, and we all know with their own citizens, Azeris, they don't have a right to human rights.
With both Armenia and Azerbaijan laying claim to this land, the dynamic is complex. Armenia gained control in the early 1900s, and then a 2020 Russian-brokered ceasefire handed Azerbaijan newfound control. Joel Veldkamp is among those who worry the worst is yet to come for Armenia, one of Christianity's oldest communities.
I think this is probably the prelude to an Azerbaijani armed attack on Nagorno-Karabakh. And if that happens and Russia does not step in, Armenia is probably not strong enough to stop them from conquering the whole region. There will be massacres, and at the end of it, this land, which is the ancient homeland of the Armenian people, this is where their alphabet was designed, it has some of the oldest churches in the world, will be completely destroyed.
This is Billy Hallowell for CBN News.
Just after midnight on September 13th, Azerbaijan launched a large-scale attack against its neighbor, Armenia. It's the latest battle in a long-running conflict between the Muslim-majority Azerbaijan and Armenia, a country that claims to be the world's first Christian nation. But the attacks on Sunday have more to do with money than with religion. It's the worst attack since 2020, when Azeri forces pushed into the exclave of Artsakh, taking lands populated by Armenians since the time of Noah. CBN was there to witness how the Azeri military put little stock in the value of civilian lives.
So you see this car right here was hit by cluster munitions. All of these little holes are from the thousands of projectiles that are thrown out by these things. They are definitely not meant for civilian areas. They're meant for troops in the open.
The most recent attack looks to be no different.
We have several civilians wounded. The attacks were not only against Armenian military positions, but there were attacks against Armenian civilian towns and villages. Several homes have been damaged, including municipal buildings. So it was an attack against military and civilian infrastructure.
In the current conflict, Azeris aren't attacking a remote area, but Armenia proper, and the objectives have everything to do with the current war in Ukraine.
People here in Armenia are understandably disturbed by the images they see coming out of Ukraine, but it's difficult for them to take a stand against Russia when Russia is the only country that stands between Armenia and their enemies to the east in Azerbaijan.
It's extremely concerning because they are attacking the sovereign territory of the Republic of Armenia, escalating this situation, this theater of hostilities to an all-time high, and it's a very, very dangerous situation at the moment.
The reason they want that is the connector between Azerbaijan and the autonomous country of Nakhchivan to Turkey, and that will allow them to have a pipeline of oil.
Indeed, Western leaders have been meeting recently with Azerbaijan's president to discuss how to get more of the country's oil to make up the shortfalls from Russia this winter. That may have emboldened the Azeris to make this move.
I think this is about money. I think this is about taking those lands right now, because that's where the majority of the attacks are happening.
The U.S. government has so far refrained from condemning the attacks, calling instead on both parties to return to the negotiating table.
There can be no military solution to this conflict. We urge restraint from any further military hostilities. We also encourage both governments to reestablish direct lines of communications across diplomatic and military channels, and to recommit to a diplomatic process to resolve the crisis.
Armenia relies on Russian peacekeepers to uphold a 2020 ceasefire. Given the distraction of the war in Ukraine, Russia may be unable to keep a lid on the hostilities here. That runs the risk of pulling Iran into the conflict, which moved troops to the border on Monday, saying it would not stand for any change in Armenia's territorial borders. While Azerbaijan desperately seeks a path for its oil to the west, many Armenian Christians see something deeper with the current conflict.
I believe this is a spiritual attack. This is a spiritual battle that has been stirred up against them. So pray for the strength and the faith, and that the gospel will continue to go forth here in Armenia, and that it will go forth in these countries that are attacking, because that is the only way we'll have peace, is in Jesus Christ.
I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
And thanks to our friends at CBN for highlighting effectively the precarious and dire situation that Armenian Christians face in the region. And it's important that Christians around the world, including our viewers, wake up to the seriousness of this dire situation. His Grace Bishop Hovakim, can you just explain the dire humanitarian situation facing Armenian Christians in Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh, knowing that the Azerbaijani forces are completely cut that corridor off, which is the main corridor from Nagorno-Karabakh to mainland Armenia, and how they've actually cut this off. They cut medical supplies off, food supplies off, and just share us with the plight of the 120,000 Armenians living there and the desperate situation they're in now.
I'll bring some figures so that it is clear. 120,000 people live in a region. It's about 2,200 square kilometers. And though it's a mountainous, beautiful region, but every day 400 ton of goods were going to the country. Now they have cut all the supplies. There is no way to took it, and there was no way actually. And look, Red Cross, International Red Cross sometimes was bringing, and we were able to send some good during the winter times and so on to the country, but since a limited number, June 12, 13, I don't remember exact day, they provoked a fight on the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and they closed that corridor. They put a checkpoint also. So nothing was going in, and if there were only a few people who were able to go out, and just last week before this recent escalation, they allowed one truck to enter from Lachin, one truck from their side, some bread and some, I think, some first necessary things for the consumption of people. But they exhausted all their reserves. Also, winter was coming to close. There was no gas, no electricity. So what would happen? Medicine, people would starve to death. And yesterday they attacked simply. Soldiers, they fought to the end. It was a last stand for them. But I think the forces are imbalanced actually, because from one side Azerbaijan put against Karabakh 60,000 strong force, manpower. Karabakh has 120,000 population, 30,000 children, and I don't know, women and elderly do. Only 15,000 volunteers could defend their country, and they broke their defense.
Absolutely frightening situation there. And Rafi,
it's appalling situation.
And Rafi, I think we have to talk about the fact that if, for example, Azerbaijan's demands are that the Armenian communities in Nagorno-Karabakh were to leave your ancient homeland and go into Armenia proper, that this wouldn't be the end of the conflict, would it? Because they would see this as take this territory, and next Armenia itself would be under threat as well. So share with us how vitally strategic it is that Armenia maintains control of the region of Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh.
Yeah. One could say that Artsakh is the gateway for Armenia. In other words, if Artsakh falls, then next will be Armenia. There's no doubt about that, because there's a program that's being followed, not just an incident. And therefore, for Armenia and for any Armenian, and for humanity as well, Armenian being part of nations that are living and prospering nowadays, and have been for centuries and long time, it's important that we maintain our culture, we maintain our country, we maintain our freedom. There is also the international law protecting the right of self-determination. Are we going to respect that or not? Are we going to respect the will of 120,000 Armenians that decided to become independent, just like Azerbaijan did, just like Armenia or Georgia did? So how come in this case we are making a difference and saying that Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh is part of Azerbaijan? Yes, it's in that territory, but doesn't belong to them. And we stated twice already that it was given to them, gifted to Azeris by Russians at the time during the Soviet Union. So this right of self-determination is protected by international law, and it needs to be respected. And I think the efforts that will be forthcoming in the future weeks should follow that principle and find a solution that would eventually make Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh independent, and once they are independent, they can decide whether they want to join Armenia or not. We are in a difficult situation as far as the Armenians are concerned, because if Armenia claims Artsakh as part of Armenia, then they will be in direct conflict with Azerbaijan. And also they need to some extent respect the orders that come from Russia as well. and Russia is very careful not to strengthen their relationship with Azerbaijan or with Turkey. So there is a lot of political relationship that is active in this equation, and for us in the West particularly, it's very important for us to be focused and remain focused on the issue of self-determination and work towards a solution that would eventually give freedom to those people to decide for their future.
And His Grace Bishop Hovakim, our viewers watching this programme today, and this is really her kind of wake-up call to everyone, all of us, to say that we can't allow another genocide to happen again against your people. How should our viewers respond to the threat that your nation, your people are facing?
First thing, just I have to add what Rafi said. When we were planning this program, the situation was completely different. As of today, the situation has changed, and these people, Armenian people, these poor people who live there, are completely in the hands of God. Yep. And they have left in the mercy of, I don't know how they will deal with them. If international community fails to guarantee safety of Armenians in Karabakh, then we are going to face genocide. This is why our believers, they have to write to their MPs and demand from the governments to make a pressure on Azerbaijan. This is the only way to protect them, because Armenia doesn't have forces there, doesn't have power, and doesn't have capacity after the war. And we are small in numbers. We are only 3 million. Azerbaijan is 10 million, and Turkey is 70, 80 million. They are supporting them. If they succeed in their program, and so far they have been successful, to be honest, then we are going to lose another Christian settlement, and we are going to lose another cause to injustice, let's say.
Yeah. So I just want to thank you both very much for being on this programme today to raise alarm and concern. And just thank you for watching today's Middle East Report. It's been a difficult programme because the Armenian Christians face the prospect of another genocide, and the situation is deteriorating day by day. And it's imperative that we not only pray for the Armenian Christians, but we also get politically active and write to our members of parliament about this desperate situation. So thank you for watching this week's edition of the Middle East Report.